everybody in our streaming audience. Can we please stand for the pledge? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get started tonight for our agenda items, we do have, I have Dr. Stimmel who would like to make a statement this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Verdone. Thank you, Board, and thank you to everyone in the audience. This announcement is a very bittersweet one, but after 40 years in public education, 19 of them in Sayville, I am excited to say that I am about to begin a new chapter in my life. And the Board of Education has accepted my intent to retire, effective as of right now, September 30th. So my excitement's tempered by the sadness I'm going to feel at not being with the folks around this table, our administrators, our teachers, and our staff, and especially our students. I think we can all agree that the last 2 years have probably been the most challenging time in our district's history. And frankly, everyone in this room, as well as the principals, teachers, and families, their support has helped us get through the most difficult of situations. I look back over my time in Sayville, and it's, trust me, it's not about me, it's about us. And I think we can all take justifiable pride in the many great accomplishments of our students and our staff. And together we have done much for the children and the community of Sayville. I do want to say Sayville is blessed with strong leadership on all levels, and that doesn't just mean administrators. We have an incredible Board of Education. We do have awesome principals and administrators, teacher leaders, staff leaders, and parent leaders. So I'm optimistic. Timing, this is the right time for me and for my family, but I'm also very optimistic that the pandemic, which has dogged us for the past 2 years, is going to loosen its grip. And I think that's in part what makes this an advantageous time for the district to go through this transition. We do have the greatest kids on earth, and I have said that really since my first day at Cherry Avenue. It's been my privilege to serve them. It's also been my great fortune to have gotten to know so many people in this community over the past 2 decades. And I gotta tell you, the people I work with, especially the people around this table, you're colleagues, but you're also family to me. And your kindness will never be forgotten. And I just wanna say, talking about family before I move on, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the love and the support of my wife and children. Any success that I have would not have been possible without them. So I wish all the best to our students, our families, faculty and staff, and our wonderful Sayville community. May God bless everyone, and in all that we do, both now and in the future. Thank you. So thank you for helping me get through that. And I do want to mention, to my right, to the audience's left, we have Mr. Devanel back, and so we're very glad that
I am to be back.
So it's great to have you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Stimmel.
I just want to be, I don't recall accepting it.
I was going to get there.
I think we do have.
I was going to go around that way.
So I don't think.
We need a motion for that.
Rejecting.
It's been certainly a pleasure working with you over the years, and I use a line that we often use when we give to students. I wish you continued success all your future. Thank you for your service.
Thank you very much.
All right, next item on the agenda tonight is correspondence. I did have something. We have I guess it's a thank you for our work from a couple of, quite a few teachers out of
Love
buildings.
Dr. Stimmel.
And students, and their classes.
So thank you very much.
So-
It's more than appreciated.
Yes.
They made personalized cards for
I love that.
all of us, so.
I love that.
All right, next on the agenda tonight, Superintendent of Schools, Dr.
Okay.
Stimmel.
Thank you, Mr. Verdone. So let me just get my notes. Nothing major happened since our last board meeting. After many months of waiting, the state has, obviously everyone knows, come out with new guidelines concerning our response to the pandemic. And the Department of Health and the governor both agreed that the time had come to make masks an optional part of our pandemic response. There also have been other changes, so I'm going to try to just summarize and put it down into what's required and then what's recommended. The details will be shared on our webpage, but to give the board and the community a quick overview, there's certain things that the district still must do. So whenever there's positive COVID cases, whether it's staff or students, these still must be reported to the Suffolk County Department of Health Services. Individuals who test positive, whether they're students or staff, must isolate for 5 days. So that's if you test positive for COVID. If you are no longer symptomatic, on the 6th day, you may come back. However, you are required, the mask is going to come back here. Individuals who tested positive, if you recall, a year and a half ago, if you tested positive, you had to stay out for 10 days. Now, if you're symptom-free, you can come back on the 6th day, but you must wear a mask through the 10th day. All individuals must be tested weekly. Now, the exception here is employees who have been vaccinated and can demonstrate that receive a waiver. They do not require weekly testing. If an individual is symptomatic, whether it's a staff member or a student, they will be sent home. They may be asked to get COVID tested. We do have a pretty robust supply of COVID tests, so parents are always, it's available for parents and staff should they wish to engage in self-testing. So that covers the testing. The next items are considered recommendations by the Department of Health. So they're not required, but the Department of Health does recommend for students and staff who wish to do so to wear that they can and should wear masks if they wish to do so, or if there's a medically reason for them to do so. Quarantining is no longer required. However, what the district will do is any students or staff who are potentially exposed to a positive case will be notified, and families will receive explicit directions for what to look for, and those students may continue coming to school, but if they do develop symptoms at that point, we would have to treat them as a potential case. Transportation, very important. A lot of families were concerned about this. Masks are also optional when riding the school bus. However, the transportation company will continue to enhance ventilation and engage in rigorous cleaning procedures on the buses. That also applies to our custodians who will continue their very comprehensive cleaning procedures each day to help keep our classrooms and instructional spaces and offices as healthy and safe as possible. The recommendation is that the district will continue to practice social distancing wherever practicable. We will continue to emphasize hand washing and respiratory etiquette. As always, we're going to ask our staff and our parents to parents to monitor their children's health, our staff to monitor their own. And folks, if you're sick, stay home. That's good. That was good advice even before the pandemic. As I mentioned earlier, we will report positive cases. We will also monitor the transmission rate. I'm very pleased to let the community know. We only had one positive case of a staff member, and that occurred over the February break. We did not have any cases prior to the February break, and as of today, we have had no cases this week. And we upgraded our ventilation throughout the district, including our univents and filters. So we will continue to make sure that our ventilation is as good and robust as it possibly can be. So that's an update concerning the issue of our pandemic response. The next item I have for the Board of Ed, as you know, we are in the middle of budget season. So tonight, Dr. Gurgis has prepared two presentations. The first presentation has to do with a proposed bond, which we have been discussing. This bond is what I would call a basic maintenance bond. It is very cost effective and a fiscally advantageous way to maintain our facilities. Sayville Schools is known for the quality of its buildings and for the building upkeep. Our buildings are among the most inviting instructional spaces, I would say, on Long Island. And Sayville has long upheld a tradition of keeping its facilities in top-notch condition. So, there's few things more basic than roofs. And Dr. Gurgis is going to talk to you Dr. Gurgis will give you the details, but tonight's bond proposal presentation the main focus will be on the condition of our roofs and our plans to maintain them. So, Dr. Gurgis.
Thank you, Dr. Stimmel. Thank you, Board of Education, and members of the audience. As you mentioned, we are exploring the possibility of putting the bond in this year's annual election, which is on May 17th. And this presentation is really designed to provide a primer of sorts and understanding of how we got here, what's involved. So the first aspect, why do we need a bond referendum? What are the purposes? It's similar to a bond is similar to a home equity line of credit or a second mortgage. It permits the district to perform necessary capital upgrades to adhere to health and safety requirements. Sometimes they're one of the same, and to include renovations typically not accomplished within the facilities and capital budget that is part of the general fund that we put before the voters every year. The borrowing allows for large-scale projects, as mentioned, roofs, necessary to maintain the stability, integrity, and longevity of our buildings, to keep the envelope and the footprint intact so that students, staff can go in on a daily basis, feel safe, secure, and that they're in a good learning environment. Also while meeting our programmatic and instructional needs, and also community expectations. It's imperative that our school facilities, as mentioned, are kept to the highest of standards for both structural purposes, health purposes, and also safety, because the buildings aren't just used by students, it is used quite frequently by the community as well. Other key reasons, improvements do address health and safety concerns identified in buildings. Whatever you repair, you replace, it will address certain aspects that do need to be looked at on an annual or long-term basis. Renovated spaces provide students and staff the security and peace of mind necessary to progress the instructional program. Really what that means is less distractions, less issues. If they're in a nice, clean, well-lit, healthy environment, they're conducive to learning, which is what we do want. Addressing the infrastructure of our buildings is a necessary responsibility to protect and enhance our community. And also, it increases the real estate. Restoring debt service, which is the whole purpose of the bond, you take out X amount of dollars, it levels the current budgetary amounts. And there's a slide that I've presented in the past and will present tonight that will show our debt service levels. By taking out that borrowing, the district will not experience a shortfall. We will keep it at the level that we're at now, and we will also receive about approximately 68% of that total amount amortized over 15 years by the state. So our expenses and our revenues will stay in line over time, with, of course, no additional burden on the taxpayer. So again, this is a slide I've used in the past, debt service, to kind of get an idea of where we are for the upcoming 2022-23 school year. We're looking at about 4.6 million in total debt service, of which 3.7 is for the school district. We do have an amount in there, both for the tax anticipation note, that's a smaller amount, and also for the library. And our goal is to keep it at that level, going forward. And this is the chart, the second chart that I mentioned, the analysis of remaining debt service. And as you see, about 3 years down the line, the cliff starts to emerge. And as that cliff starts to go down, the amount of funding that you get from the state in the form of building aid also starts to evaporate. However, if bonded debt is on the books, you do receive 68% of that amount back from the state. So that cliff won't exist. You'll actually see more of a level line from the state. So obviously, when you take out a bond or any sort of borrowing, there are concerns, but there are also opportunities that come with those concerns. So one of the things that we looked at are the years, the amounts, and the financial considerations with this type of undertaking. And the first question is, okay, why and what particular avenues or areas do we need to really explore? So the usable lifespan of several building roof structures throughout the district are at or near their end. And what I mean by that is there are two aspects to that. Their usable life. They're rated typically for about 20 years, and after that, you really start to see some real problems. Corrosion, damage, the core areas of the roof start to erode. Plus, the warranties also start to expire. Once that happens, the repairs become extremely costly, especially now because of all of the economic stressors that we've been seeing. So this is the prime opportunity to not encounter those issues, but also maintain that structural integrity over time. It's also necessary to maintain the healthy environments required throughout the building and learning spaces. In short, we don't want to see leaks throughout the building. Leaks lead to mold. Mold can lead to other things. If the roofs are not maintained or secured properly, eventually that will become a bigger issue. Also, the core areas of the roof will start to go, and then you're looking at a full roof replacement, which would be far more costlier. Planned improvements will meet existing programmatic needs and ensure students can continue accessing a full complement of academic program. In short, it's not going to interrupt what goes on in the building. In fact, doing it over, let's say, the summer period or the break periods, because as I'll get into it later, as a reskinning will not affect what goes on in the building because you're not shutting down areas or moving students around. From a financial perspective, bonded debt is considered a tax cap exclusion, so it actually helps the district throughout the budget process and also on the revenue side. And as I mentioned before, the district receives 68% of the approved amount in the form of building aid, which is a form of state aid that we do receive every year. After that period, let's say if you have debt in the form of $10 million, that's $6.8 million over the span of 15 years evaporates. So again, putting debt on the books allows the district to continue that revenue stream. So this is again a slide I've used in the past, but I want to highlight it: managing debt service. So some of the talking points, as I said, the expenditures over the future years allows for the district's upkeep of the infrastructure. It maintains budget expenses without adding additional burden to the tax rate, fills gaps when we have decreasing debt, and also decreasing debt service drives the tax cap percentage down. The building aid percentage, again, 68% or 68 cents for every dollar. The timeline, what are we looking at? So we've done a needs assessment. I only put 2 months because at this point it is 2 months until the budget vote, but we have been looking at this for some time now. It's been a topic of conversation between the administration, facilities, a bond council, and our architects. The evaluation period will take approximately 3 months, which is the period that we're in now as well. The May 2022 vote is when the referendum is proposed. From there, the architect would prepare the plans and specs to the State Ed Department, SED. We're looking at approximately a 6-month approval period. Now, again, this is a reskinning. This is not 17 different projects that are going up there, so they have to evaluate the mechanical aspects and the architectural specs. So it's a lot simpler in that regard, so that does work in our favor. And then bidding and construction borrowing would happen after SED approval, which could be the beginning of the 23-24 school year. So when developing this presentation, I wanted to really go back and see what did the district do previously and what are the priorities that led us to this point. Particularly, when did we do the roofs? So going back about 20 some odd years, 22 years ago, the bond, and they're all named, the year in front, the 2000 bond was for $30.5 million. And what did it take care of? The roof of Cherry Avenue, Lincoln, one section of Sayville High School, the administration building, Sunrise Drive, Green Avenue. We also did boilers, oil tank replacements, and upgrades, window technology upgrades, HVAC, mechanical, plumbing, electrical throughout the district. Most of that was addressed in a bond that came 15 years later, but this laid the groundwork for where we are hoping to head from here on in. In 2008, there was a bond taken out for the library for approximately $13 million, and that was for the construction of the building that is in this parking lot. In 2007, there was a bond taken for $13.2 million, but if you remember, there was a program that was put out by State Ed at the time called Excel. So the district was actually refunded, again, in the form of Excel aid. It was a form of one-time aid for about $1.14 million. That took care of generators throughout the district. There were cafeteria renovations. There was an overhead renovation at the middle school. And also the elementary library media center renovations and add-ons were part of that $13 million bond, which really came out to just around $12 million. The most recent bond was in 2019, which addressed the Sayville Middle School roof, the turf field locker room, the natatorium, pool area at the middle school, boilers, kitchen upgrades. All of the elementary and the middle school do have AC, parking lots, storm pools, concession stands, and bathrooms that are also not far from this facility, and also the bus school at high school. So as you see, most of the roof upgrades happened about 20 some odd years ago. I should say within the bond 20 years ago. Now, the roof, the reason that we see this as the cornerstone of this bond, it's an integral necessity to preserve the envelope of the building. Excluding the middle school, all of the roofs are at or near their useful lifespan. The surfaces and edging require replacement, but as a result of maintenance and upkeep since their installation, the integrity of the core roof decking, which is really the area under the membrane, under the skin, they're both in sound condition and do not require replacement. And we've had our architects look at this. We've had some of the roofing companies that we've used over the years come in over time, and this is the assessment that we've been provided this for. So overall, does that mean we need a full roof replacement? The answer is no. So again, going back to see when the roofs were constructed, and I should say redone. So Sayville High School Phase 1 was in 1999, then again in 2003. Sayville Middle School, again, most recently 2017. Cherry and Lincoln, as mentioned 2 slides ago, in 2001. Sunrise Drive was in 2000. The administration building was in 2004, and Green Avenue was in 2004. So you see the majority of the roofs listed here are at, above, or near that 20-year mark. So in terms of wear and tear, but also a new warranty to cover any sort of incidentals, the time really has come for that. Warranty length, by the way, is typically rated 20 years for each structure. So How big is the scope of this project? Again, resurfacing is the name of the game here, also known as reskinning the roofs. It's not a full roof replacement, but there are membrane surfaces and other edging that is installed, known as resecuring a perimeter. The high school area that we're looking at is just under 140,000 square feet. Cherry Avenue is the smallest of the instructional buildings at just under 58,000. Lincoln Avenue, 68,000. Sunrise is the largest of the elementary buildings, just under 78,000. And this building is 7,300 square feet. So for the roofs that we're looking at, we're approximating 350,000 square feet of roof space that we would look to reskin or resurface. I'm just going to go through these to give an visual of what the roof plans look like as to the scope of the work that would need to be completed. So, for example, this is a high school roof plan. Again, this is provided by our architects to see exactly what are the areas that we go over. At Cherry Avenue, you see it's a lot more spread out. Lincoln Avenue, more enclosed, with the exception of the courtyard, obviously. Sunrise, spread out also. And as I said, Sunrise does have the largest square footage out of any of the elementary buildings. And then the administration building is just pretty straightforward. So we're looking at bond amounts. What would it be? And we are in an era right now of very furtive costs. So we have to really, dig down and see what are reasonable costs, what are expenses, what are we looking at? So using the square footage area, we're looking at about just under $5 million to reskin the membrane of Sayville High School, resecure the edges, the perimeter. Cherry Avenue is about $2.5 million. Lincoln, just over $2 million. Sunrise Drive, $2.8 million. And for the administration building, just under $300,000. So we are estimating a total of $12,553,200. This is based on current costs plus contingencies, plus estimates for inflationary amounts, also architectural design fees and other associated fees. Now, this number could go lower, it could go higher, but we do feel by the time that the bond is approved, it should be within approved, if approved, and also approved by SED. We feel that this number is pretty much in the ballpark. Now, we are asking for a $15 million bond because, again, of contingencies, and if bond funds do allow, we would look to complete the air conditioning project HVAC upgrade at Sayville High School within the auditorium. Now, this was something proposed 7 years ago in the 2015 bond. There is a project number at SED. Again, the premise back then was also if bond funds allowed, we would complete that project. So we are putting that forward again as a potential after the roofs are completed. So let's assume that all goes well, everything is done, the roofs are reskinned, resurfaced. The first thing that should be known is, and I can mention the 20-year warranty. With the technology and the processes of reskinning, it does come a full 20-year warranty. That means it's not just the membrane, it's the entire roof, including the components underneath. Once that's done, one of the areas that we've also started to really investigate is another EPC, also known as an energy performance contract, which are energy efficient projects brought into a school district or an organization to reduce, number one, carbon footprint, but also any energy costs that are existing or any rising energy costs to mitigate them. So two of the areas that we looked at were the high school and Cherry Avenue, which are primed for solar panels at both buildings. And if funds and other opportunities allow, we would continue those projects at other buildings based on costs and available rebates. Before I get to the other slides, I just want to talk about those rebates. We've been in contact with a couple of companies regarding those rebates. Currently, there are no EPC energy performance rebates on the table. However, earlier this week, we reached out again, and there are negotiations with PSE&G and LIPA that apparently are in progress to reinstate those rebates. Some of those rebates over time have included the replacement of lighting to have energy efficient lighting, to have solar panels, boilers, transformers, etc. So We're hoping that in the very near future that this does become available, because then we would look to engage in that process as a long-term solution as well. So to kind of review some of the previous energy performance contracts. The first one the district took out, but what did we address then? District-wide lighting upgrades, the actual building envelope, PTAC systems, that's a type of thermal energy system. The BMS, which is in place, the building management system, this controls our heat and our ventilation. Domestic hot water heaters, windows and doors, steam trap updates, pipe valve installation, boiler economizers, photovoltaic, electric, window film, roof replacements in certain sections, PC power management, water conservation, wireless clocks, and transformers. Again, it sounds like a lot, but these are small items that were installed in certain places that fall within these categories that allow for those energy efficient projects. The second energy performance contract, that was in 2017. We addressed the district-wide interior and exterior LED lighting, like I mentioned before, such as the bulbs that are overhead, emergency lighting, building automation system, new boiler plant replacement, new boiler equipment at Cherry, rooftop units, cogen, which is a hybrid energy system for heat and power, with the backup system, existing backup generator enhancements, weatherization, steam trap replacement, and pipe insulation as well. So over those two contracts or bond issuances, we're able to reduce our energy bill, but also go with the spirit of reducing the carbon footprint. So in a nutshell, this is the basics of the bond that we would propose, some of the history and the rationale.
Just a few questions, correct me if I'm wrong. With the reskinning, in addition to structural upgrades, the roofs also provide additional reflective properties that reduce cooling costs. And again, the seal that they provide, it's minimal in the winter because they are white. It does provide additional, reduction in heating costs as well because of the envelope, basically.
Yes, by putting in a new membrane, and we have to have, in order for this to happen, and we're lucky in the position that we do, we only have one layer. Yes, it would regulate the temperature inside the building slightly, but that slightly definitely will reduce the power consumption, whether it's heating season or cooling season.
Excellent. And then just in terms of the EPC, I was proud to be a part of the first EPC and the second EPC. In addition to, reducing carbon footprint, in addition to, helping to improve student health, I remember doing a back of the envelope calculation. I believe it saved the district over the 12 years of the EPC somewhere between $9 and $11 million, which calculated out somewhere between $60 to $70 per taxpayer. And that was low-hanging fruit. I think, and what I really appreciate is in this next EPC proposal is by attacking solar as panels have gotten more efficient. We have an opportunity to not only be a leader on the island and in the region. I know districts, particularly in New Jersey, that incorporate solar projects into the classroom, where students are part of the installation process and also the monitoring process. So the green collar sector is one of the fastest growing in the country and in the world. So I really think it's a nice move forward for the district in terms of prepping students for the economy and the jobs that they're going to be going into. So
Part of the technology that comes with solar panels, again, this was generation one at the previous school district, was that there was an output report that was on websites. So monthly we were based on how much energy was brought in, how much energy was saved based on the calculations and the matrix that was present in the program. That was many, many years ago. It's obviously evolved. The technology of the solar panels has also evolved. I think there were a lot of lessons learned from 13, 14 years ago when companies did not succeed. I think the technology with the inverters has improved dramatically, which sources the energy and also stores it. In addition to that, there is a buyback program that PSE&G engages in with any organization that is undertaking the solar program. Programmatically and from an instruction perspective, yes, how do you calculate megawatt hours? What are kilowatt hours? What does it mean in terms of the carbon footprint? What is it reducing? How is this technology developed? How is it installed? Most importantly, because you also create a roof warranty as well. And how is it fixed? What are the components, et cetera? So they're all science type of math projects that actually be easily accessible. Again, even if on the website to show what is the weekly, daily, monthly consumption and how to even convert that from, let's say, again, kilowatt hours to megawatt hours or any other sort of power conversion is just a basic example of how that can work out.
Which is an easy, again, it's a nice fit for our STEM and STEAM projects, our virtual enterprise.
What they've just been working on.
No, I really appreciate it. I think it's very forward thinking and.
I just have a question on that, lifespan of the roofs. Because I guess, most people hear about residential roofs being 35 years. A commercial roof is saying there's only 25 years. Is there any added lifespan if you do a complete redo? But of course, I'm sure that's probably cost prohibitive, right? Because if you do the.
That's a great question, because we look at what would a complete roof replacement cost and what are the benefits. A complete roof replacement, yes, would have all the core elements of the decking and also a new membrane installed. But if your membrane is in good shape, if your core elements are in good shape, which as we understand they are, then it not only becomes cost prohibitive, it also becomes wasteful because the area under the membrane does not need to be replaced. It can still move forward. Now, again, if you reskin it, you're getting a full roof warranty. So let's say that there is damage 3, 5, 6 years down the line under there, the district would not be on the hook for replacing and paying for that repair.
And the difference between residential and commercial, that's just what it is, right?
I was gonna say, yeah.
Because
it's a huge-
they're flat roofs
Yeah.
versus a peaked roof.
And some of the products that they also have to use with securing that flat roof. And also, again, here proximity, to the water, to some of the elements, et cetera.
I think that's what we just have to be careful about when we communicate to the public, because they'll be wondering why we're getting an inferior roof.
Well, I actually did a paper on grad school. So from a cost benefit perspective, the PVC, the white PVC membrane, again, in terms of maintenance and in terms of heating costs, was actually the most cost effective option, especially for the flat roofs and on a commercial application. So.
And that's true. I mean, how are we gonna? This is not going to be an exciting bond. So we got to, demonstrate what the benefits are as far as the energy savings and things like that.
It's a the show must go on type bond.
Yeah.
So,
And I have to say, Sam did a good job, nobody fell asleep.
Yeah.
No, your point's well taken, Tom, about the warranty. But even, if I'm not mistaken, even in residential, yes, you can get a 30-year warranty for peak. But if you have a portion of your house where it's flat, where they're laying the flat sheets out, that typically is only 10 years.
No, that's what I'm saying.
So that might explain the
It's just the
difference.
mindset.
Yeah.
People always get 30
Yeah.
years. The other question I have is, what's the annual debt service estimated to be at?
I actually have a schedule that was produced by Unistat. I believe it would be on the principal side on a 15-year is approximately $1 million. I think we're at a 3.25% interest rate that was estimated. It's probably going to go up. So we're 200 to 1.2. We could probably get, let's estimate 7% on that. So it would be about $840,000 back.
Ranch? That's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd be remiss, Dr. Stimmel and I, have gone over this presentation. The history, obviously, I 6 months. But, Mr. Belmonte, Danny Castellano, Will Seuss, and Domenico also helped out in providing a lot of this, because once I started to really grasp what was done before, it was really started to form. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Burgess, do you need to reset, or can you go right into?
10 seconds.
Segue into,
So the next item that we wish to present to the board and to the community is the next step in our budget presentation for the 22-23 school year.
Thank you, Ben. So we've gone through two budget presentations similar to previous years. Typically there are four that are presented prior to the adoption services. Partially, so we're going to go over some of the areas not discussed before, such as transportation, our transport capital lines, and some other highlights that have recently come out. So to review what we've done so far, proposed 2022-23 budget is coming in at an amount of $99,302,157. The budget-to-budget increase of 2.4%, which carries a tax rate, a tax levy of 1.72%, which is at the limit. To give a quick summary of what are the components making up this amount, you see salaries and fringe benefits as the large percentage, followed by debt service, our contractual expenses that do not include transportation and BOCES. You see BOCES as a standalone figure of just over $6 million. Supplies, textbooks about $2.2 million. Transportation next year, which I will discuss later on in the presentation, is approximately $4.6 million. And then you see our transfers to capital and the special aid fund. And the capital fund, I will go into detail with that as well as to what that will cover for next year. So transportation, I want to spend some time talking about how transportation operates in this district and some of the components that are associated with it. The Sayville contracts with a company known as Suffolk Transportation for all of our bus services. We obtained an RFP, a request for proposal for our large buses, vans, and field trips, and athletic transportation contracts almost 3 years ago during the 2021 school year. And a 5-year contract at the time was awarded to Suffolk Transportation. And for next year, out of that 5-year contract, we will be entering year number 3. Now, what are the benefits of a 5-year contract? Well, you have cost predictability and continuity of service. Given the fluctuation, I should say the increasing trend with CPI, the Consumer Price Index, when this contract was negotiated, we actually have a fixed price increase for each of the 5 years. So some of the shocks to the system that we've discussed here and that we're encountering, 5%, 7% increases, we would not be privy to because, again, that was a fixed amount agreed upon about 2.5 years ago. So let's go through some transportation facts to see where we currently stand. We can continue to promote social distancing whenever possible, and obviously because of this week, we do have different regulations that have been put forward. Disinfecting and sanitizing the buses is still continuing. At the time, students were to wear face masks. We're riding on the bus now; it is optional. Please excuse that I did write this slide prior to. And we do continue to follow updated federal and state guidelines. Some of the other facts, the actual numbers, we have 1,741 students that are eligible for transportation. I'll go through the mileage shortly. We currently transport out of that number 1,693 kids. Parents do opt to transport 48 students throughout the district that otherwise would be eligible for transportation. We have 18 buses contracted, 18 large buses, and 18 and a half vans. It's not half a vehicle, it's shared with another district. We transport 25 special ed students to 13 schools. We have 15 students that go to private parochial schools, to 5 private and parochial schools. So bus safety is continuation of the 3 bus drills a year that we do here too. So this is a slide that we really delved into to kind of get an idea of what are the real costs and what are we providing. So the district Sayville has 2,700 students, of which we have 176 total transportation routes. Of which, 176 routes.
Okay.
We route, every day we have 176, bus routes that are
I'm
conducted.
sorry.
And how many students?
1,741. Yeah, 1741. So we have 111 large bus routes, 48 runs in the morning, 63 in the afternoon. We have 65 van routes, 29 in the. And we also, as I said, we have the 10 private parochial runs, equal number, 5 and 5, morning and afternoon. So let's look at the cost. For this year, the large bus average is $94,000, which on the surface is a staggering amount. However, over the years, due to the demand for transportation, the lack of bus drivers, service, upgrades to buses throughout the industry, the number has gone up significantly. For next year, we do have a built-in cost, as I mentioned previously, $97,105. That is reflective of a 3.3% increase. To put that in perspective, the CPI for January is about 7%. For the vans next year, $76,442. For this year, that's our number. And for next year, there it is. The average cost of the van is $78,965, also reflective of that 3.3% increase. Now again, the current regional CPI was 5%, it was higher nationally. Why is that important? Because the state ed department, if you don't have a built-in number, uses the May CPI as your cost increase for next year. So that would be very devastating if that does continue. So we are in a good position at that 3.3% number, given that inflation is not showing any signs of a real slowdown in the foreseeable future. To put that also in another lens, the proposed tax levy limit for next year for the entire budget is 1.72%. So this is nearly double what the tax levy limit, the proposed tax levy limit is. 1.72 times 2 is 3.4%. We have an increase of 3.3 against the CPI that right now is in the 7% range. Just want to mention that pricing on the van varies based on the type. That's why you see the averages there in the asterisk. You have a 4-hour van, a 5-hour van, and a 6-hour van, depending on the need and the run itself. Perennially, we do get inquiries about universal transportation, so I wanted to take a few minutes and discuss that. Universal transportation basically calls that there are no mileage limits and that any student would be eligible for transportation. So the first thing to look at is what are our current mileage limits versus what are the state requirements or what are the state benchmarks for mileage limits. So for grades K through 5 in Sayville, we have a half-mile minimum. So any student who lives a half mile or more is eligible for transportation. Compared to the New York State standard, students in grades K through 8, they recommend or they have a mileage standard of 2 miles. I'm going to get into why that is important in a second. For grades 6 through 12 in Sayville, 1.5 miles is the minimum. So any student who lives 1.5 miles or more is eligible for transportation. The numbers are, they're a little disjointed, but grades 9 through 12, the recommended mileage standard is 3 miles. So, as I said before, we have 1,741 students. The enrollment that we have for this year is 2,661 students. Universal busing would add approximately 920 students to the district routes. On a straight average, using a 66-person bus, that would require a minimum of 14 buses added to the fleet. Now, I say on a straight average, that means if you have 66 students on that bus, but due to the geography, routing, start times, etc., that number is likely to be much higher because you're not, first of all, most buses are not at capacity, but most important, again, some are going to the elementary school, those run ends, start at the high school, and the middle school, the elementary school. So 14, again, is just on a straight average. It may actually very well be much higher. Yes?
Question. And then I believe also that As far as the number of buses, you have to have enough buses for the offer, for everybody to take.
No seats.
Right? Enough seats, right?
You
You
have to
can't,
have- you have to
you
have
can't
enough seats.
say, oh, there's only gonna be 50% full, so we only need this many seats, right?
That's correct. It's a guaranteed seat.
Yeah.
For each, and on top of that, which brings up another issue, is also guaranteed seat and guaranteed fleet,
Yeah.
which brings up, the other concern if that's even available. The minimum increase financially reflects an additional 2.23% to the proposed 2022-23 tax levy. As I mentioned before, it's 1.72%, but that amount of 1.36 million that's on the screen would now bring the tax levy to 3.95%. As such, there are certain necessities, piercing the cap, because again, 172 is our limit. Going to 395 requires a supermajority vote from the community, as we would have to pierce the cap. More important, and this is a long-term effect, decreasing the mileage limits will reduce transportation aid from New York State due to an increase in what's known as the non-allowable pupil decimal ratio, known as the NAPD. What that means is, those numbers that I mentioned above, the 2 miles and the 3 miles, this is the state standard. If you are transporting students below that 2-mile standard, those students are not aided based on their ratio for grades K through 8. For students in grades 9 through 12, if you're transporting students that live closer than that 3-mile benchmark, you don't get aid on that. So universal busing really now shatters that altogether, because you're going to lose aid, because now those students that are typically walkers, now you're factoring their cost into a bus, but you're not going to get aid on that because they're far below the mileage limit. So the district would actually lose aid based on their future costs in transportation. Right now, we have 31 buses that have students in that non-aidable category, again, based on our mileage limits of half a mile and 1.5 miles for those grade levels. Again, as I just mentioned, part of the issue, it's contingent on staffing. We've all seen in the paper, we've seen in publications, the staffing shortages for both bus drivers and bus personnel, and also equipment from Suffolk Transportation. Equipment is very simple, the buses themselves, if they're available, because some of the buses are at the end of their useful life. Ordering a bus, their parts, et cetera, coming in is very much up in the air as well. Other considerations, traffic. If you're going to put that many more buses on the road, the actual terms of traffic that would also be increased. The stop arms, especially now that they are tickets being issued for crossing those, so people are more cognizant that they should be stopping and not passing that stop arm. Bus stops, increase in bus stops and the traffic that will come back from there. Also, entry and exit concerns at the buildings, because that many more buses means that much more backup. The possible start and time considerations and changes as well, because it does take time to load and unload the buses throughout. Again, just to kind of rehash, the slides similar to what I've done in the past. Transportation aid is one of the 11 services aids designated by New York State. The transportation expenditure trends are by far the largest categorical cost increases. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the 2018-19 school year, $4,033,000 to this year, $4.5 million. Now, dollars to dollars, it's about $530,000. Percentage-wise, it's a 13% increase over the last 5 years, which is a very significant number, considering how some of the other costs over the years have not increased to that effect. So, switching gears to something a little more close to home within the buildings, our transfers to capital and our special aid funds. Something that we've teased out before. Our transfer to capital line is something that's been built into the budget for years to address capital improvements, renovations, additions. This current year, it was budgeted for $800,000. Next year, we're looking at a transfer to capital amount of $1 million, and the special aided fund amount for our summer program is $200,000. So let's get to the first one. What does that $1 million represent? We are looking at doing the renovations for all bathrooms on the elementary schools. We've done walkthroughs several times.
We realize that their useful life has come to an end. Sometimes they've actually surpassed that end. And it's also something that goes into the health and safety aspect that I was mentioning previously for both students and staff. And again, in terms of a learning environment, to have that facility in top shape and to have something of that caliber is very encouraging on many fronts. So, as I said, it's the elementary buildings. I've labeled it phase 1 through 3. Phase 1 being the most dire, which is Lincoln Avenue. We've identified the 18 bathrooms, which, should the budget pass, we've already started looking at some of the work needing to be done in those bathrooms. Looking at 18 bathrooms. In future years, Sunrise Drive takes the next priority, 22, and then finally Cherry. So we're looking at about a 4-year timeline by the time things get approved, materials, installation, size, etc. And I'm going to go back to this in a second. I just want to talk about the transfer to special aid funds. This represents the district's cost share for special ed summer school program and other special ed programs, and the amount remains unchanged from the budget. Now, what I'm showing you on the screen here is a shot taken earlier this week of one of the bathrooms that was in very dire shape at Lincoln Avenue, and this is what it looks like now. I just want to excuse this right here. There is a partition.
We don't put it
It's military grade. It's not a guard, type thing. There is a partition. But I just want to show, this is a preview of what the bathroom is with the tiling pattern that we've put in place. The sinks, the floor, which is an epoxy floor, so you don't see the grout partitions throughout, which eliminates the mold and other discolorations that come about over time. This is another one, the completed high school renovation at Sayville High School. These, by the way, were done last week. They started on Friday and they ended Sunday, again, minus the partitions. But as you see, this is a preview of what they would look like both for the student and staff side. So we're excited that this might be a possibility, considering the shape that some of them are in. And to be honest with you, that some of them have not been renovated for a number of decades. So just wanted to put those visuals up there.
But the amount, you say the capital fund, $1 million, so is that covering the,
Phase 1 for Lincoln.
okay, but then each year it's gonna be $1 million?
Yes, that we're projecting for Sunrise in 23-24 and in the 24-25 school year for Cherry Avenue.
And that's similar to the way we handled the unit replacement as well?
Yes, I want to mention Cherry Avenue. The larger bathrooms, some of the other ones they're in better shape, for lack of better words. Some were renovated.
The two of them, not over with Sunrise, right?
Sorry?
Two of them have just been renovated at Sunrise.
Yes.
It's been the last 5 years.
Right. Sunrise being having a larger footprint, more bathrooms. That's why we see 22 there. But for Cherry Avenue, it's not as much because we did do some renovations for some of the larger bathrooms. Move to the next area, equipment. Pretty straightforward. We're looking at a budget increase of $42,000. Equipment need, projected costs for the 22-23 school year. In accordance with district policy, equipment with a cost of $1,000 or more is charged to an equipment budget code. And this is the breakdown of the 6 areas. To put it in terms of a bar graph, we do see a 5-year trend that does go up and down, again, depending on need, costs, what some of the departments have to replace over time. Now, I'm sorry. We've gone through the expenditure side, so we get to how we fund the slide.
Register equipment bid?
Equipment page?
And common to get equipment tape.
Oh.
Did Mr. Belmonte put you up there?
Yeah.
Do you know the story?
I believe that. For the revenue side of the budget, we're looking at a slight increase for 22-23, primarily because foundation aid increased by the minimum percentage due to the settlement of New Yorkers for Students' Educational Rights lawsuit, which I mentioned previously. The state continues to rely up until 2023 on federal stimulus money to close their gap. However, there are new revenue sources in the pipeline that would look to offset that amount that's currently in place. In draft one of the budget, as I mentioned, we did increase state aid by just under $915,000. Other income was up by about $180,000. We still use our fund balance and reserves in purposeful ways to offset some of the decreasing revenues to sustain our programs and opportunities and to stay within the tax cap that I mentioned of 1.72. Total from fund balance and reserves is just under $6 million, and the tax rate of 1.72 carries an approximate increase of $138 or approximately $11.50 a month. That's based on an assessed value of a house of $40,000. And how's that calculated? What's the assessed value? How many homes do we have in the community? The number comes to just under 40,000. This is an average. It may not represent everybody's individual homes. That can be calculated through their tax bill, but just to give a general number, that is the amount that we are putting on. To visualize on the chart, this is the proposed revenue and tax schedule, breaking down our state aid, our pilot payments, our payment in lieu of taxes for property that we have in the district, our other income, and you see the total at the bottom of 39.5.
How many more years are left of that pilot?
Eight.
And it can be renewed again, depending on.
Depending on if the IDA engages, and sometimes they'll renew an agreement while they're in that current agreement.
But it shrinks over the years, right?
Yes.
The pilot.
It depends. It depends on the agreement. It could stay stable, it could shrink, it could increase.
How has ours been? Has it remained stable?
It's gone up by, I want to say $40,000, at least this year, from 21-22 to next year.
And it's
So
based on the assessment of the property?
it's based on the assessment, but sometimes it's also based on an agreement made between the IDA and the agency themselves. So they'll have a fixed schedule. Some will have a percentage increase, some will have it based on their AV, and some of them will say this is the flat dollar amount that you're going to pay each year.
And we only have one pilot program, and that's for the person.
Yes, for them.
It's the biggest black box in taxation and government or whatever.
Yes.
You don't know what goes on.
So you
And
think,
the school district, we have no influence over it. Otherwise,
The only avenues that are sometimes proposed is to attend a meeting, to provide a written statement or an oral statement at that meeting that would go into the record for consideration.
I did that years ago, you know where it got me?
to the school board.
school board.
With the revenue and tax rate schedule on the screen, we're looking at our fund balance amount is set $5,939,000. Is the proposal for next year, a slight increase of $139,000. We do see some decreases and increases in some areas. Just want to mention the $166,000 increase is from the health insurance settlement that occurred last year. This is a major help considering the cost of health insurance went up nearly 13% this year across the state. So this is a very helpful offsetting revenue. As you see on the bottom, the other statistics related to tax rate for $100 and the home assessed at $40,000. Projected revenues, goes in a pie chart, you see the vast majority is property taxes. Long Island is a very heavy property tax area that funds district operations, followed by state aid, applied fund balance, the pilot amount, other income, and investment income. To give a quick preview, or overview, I should say, of our fund balance amounts, we have built a very healthy fund balance over the years, which has allowed us for our favorable interest rates and also rating in the controller's office to itemize the numbers. The restricted fund balance, which is money that is appropriated for specific purposes, such as workers' compensation, ERS, the Employee Retirement System, TRS, is approximately $23.6 million. Assigned fund balance and other fund balances come out to about $5.5 million. Our 4%, the famous 4% number, is about just under $4 million. So our total reserves and fund balance is at $32.96 million at the end of the 2020-21 school year. And we do look to, at the very least, stabilize that number going forward. So, on the government side, on the state side, what are we seeing? Today is March 3rd. The executive budget came out in mid-January, it was January 18th. And again, one of the main aspects for funding the foundation aid, state commitment to fully fund foundation aid within 3 years, resulting from the lawsuit previously mentioned, beginning with a sufficient or minimum increase in certain cases such as Sayville for the upcoming school year. The state allocated just under $31 billion in state aid, 21 of which to foundation aid, expense-based, and UPK aids, which made up the rest of the amounts. And as I said before, there is planned collaboration with congressional leaders and other administration officials to invest in pre-K and make it permanent. Other items, again, to mention, waiving of the $35,000 cap for retirees because there is a huge labor shortage in all areas. Teachers, bus drivers, security, administrators, etc. They would be able to retain their retirement benefits, but at the same time, fill in gaps that are in dire need. Teacher certification and support, streamlining the cert process. Health grants that are proposed to curb and address some of the COVID-19 effects that have unfortunately plagued the state and school districts over the year. The New York State budget approval deadline is March 31st of this year. That's when the legislature would, typically in the past, there would be a negotiation between the governor's office and the legislature. Because this is a robust executive proposal, I don't know how much the legislator would add. I don't see there are any deletions from this. The legislature has typically been in very much support of funding education and continuing many of the initiatives. So we do hope that it does go through. If there's anything extra, that would be wonderful. But this is around the time when those negotiations start, and a lot of the advocacy of many groups also coincides with this time right now. As I mentioned before, I'm going to just put it up on the screen. Some of the highlights of the instruction and support program, Regeneron program semi-finalists. The STEM classes at the middle school, our RTI programs, our athletic accomplishments, our rich curricular programs that we have in the district. Some of the additional ones are in our 2 and 4 year college enrollment rates.
I think you left something out. My conversational Spanish in kindergarten.
It's actually, there is a department here.
There is? Oh! Okay.
We have places for the language and culture in elementary school right there, third from the bottom.
Very good.
We're on the athletic program, and again, preservation of our rich program, our staff development and opportunities for everybody, which really brings about a tremendous sense of pride and accomplishment from our program, the support of the faculty, the board, and everybody involved. District-wide infrastructure, the actual nuts and bolts, the buildings themselves, custodial buildings and grounds, what drives everything, our building condition survey, which has been able to allow us to identify the roof project that I previously mentioned, student accommodations, continued use of district facilities by outside groups such as CYO, and reinvestment of our energy savings, as mentioned with solar, for some of our maintenance projects using those state monies. So in summary, again, 99 million, 302, 157 is our proposed draft 1 budget amount, a 2.4% spending increase, a 1.72% tax rate increase, which equates to a $138 a month average, or $11.50 a month average increase. We are at the tax levy limit, so it is not over the property tax cap, so the cap does not need to be pierced. And to kind of just summarize before we go into next week's presentation, the fourth one as to why is the budget important. Our instructional program really is the core, the center of this district. The budget and fiscal management, stemming from that instructional program, why we do what we do, plus our facilities, plus our staff, really equates to the success of stable schools and the community. So when the question is asked, what is the reason why we do this? This is exactly why, and the highlights are included throughout. So with that, our next meeting is next Thursday. We look at what a 0% contingency budget must look like, which is one of the things we do go through every year. And if all proceeds well, we would ask the board to adopt the 2022-23 budget for the referendum for the ballot on May 17th, 2022.
Questions?
I'm so thrilled that we're starting that program, especially when you see on TV, people in third world countries speaking English and we can't speak another language. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
I have it in there, so we'll look forward to that.
Yeah, I think it's
We'll pass it.
important we start someplace.
In the capital budget, is it just funding for just the bathrooms or any other capital projects?
Just the bathrooms for this, because it is 18 bathrooms, so it would include demolition, testing, reconstruction, flooring, etc. So again, it is a bit of an estimate that's higher than normal now, just because we do anticipate increased costs and labor in the coming months and year.
And you can provide a list of the equipment.
Yes, yes, I do.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Burgess, and Mr. Bedone, that concludes the superintendent's report.
Next item on our agenda is Board of Education discussion. I think we have one is we'll be voting on Houston Suffolk Post's nomination. It is on our agenda tonight. We have 5 names, and it is on us, so just take a look at the 5 names. And I think we're all running out of votes anyway, so it's makes it simple for us.
I'll vote for all.
Yeah. Other item is legislative forum is on March 11th, which is next Saturday. It's actually going to be in person. We do have a number of legislators who will be there in person, a couple will be zooming in. So it's I think you have it in front of you. I will be attending. I am on the executive board for that. I think Dr. Georgia. But that's what I have. One more thing. I was actually at the Lincoln Avenue PTA meeting last night, Tuesday, whatever it was. It was great to be back in person. Great to see the parents in the faces and stuff. So hopefully, it's a trend that continues. That's what I have.
I wanted to say 2 things. I attended the special education meeting Tuesday night, transitioning from CPSE to CSE. It's a lot of information, but if anyone wasn't able to attend, I would definitely recommend reaching out to Ms. Giganti because she had a lot of good information.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Dr. is such a great group of people for that organization as well. So.
And really good information too for the parents. So I wanted to know if we could just review the process for the hiring for the new positions, like specifically the AD, just like the process.
Sure. So for our hiring for new teachers, new administrators, we start out obviously posting, get candidates in, but for the actual process of interviewing and how that goes, our administrators do a screening. So we may see, for example, we have 2 administrative positions of the athletic coordinator position and our high school assistant principal. We may see 20, 30, 40 candidates for each of those positions. For screen, we use maybe 10 or 15-minute interviews each. From that group, the administrators, a lot to do with central office staff interviews. We'll move, maybe if we have 40 candidates, maybe somewhere between 5 and 10 to our site-based round. Our site-based interviews will then have parents, teachers, and administrators on. And then they have to come to consensus on who they want to move forward to the superintendent's recommendations. So it's kind of a multi-tiered approach. We wouldn't want to give site-based that large group of staff members or potential staff members to look at, but we do a screening process first and go to our site-based process.
So for administrative positions, I know we switched to OLAS, which was a much larger pool for teachers. And we've seen.
Same thing with administrators.
Right, so that was my question.
Yeah,
Do we use OLAS for?
The assistant principal position that we have open, the 219 applicants for that. That's a huge number. So I want to say between Mr. Hopper, Christian, and myself, we had about 20 or so candidates that we were looking at just recruiting into the line. So my guess is we'll probably have between 5 and 10 go to website based.
So for the AD and for the AP, we're using OLAS?
Absolutely.
Security director, are we using OLAS?
OLAS as well.
Okay.
Once OLAS, that's put out publicly internally as well. Yeah, I'm
Do
trying
you
to
know how many candidates we got for the?
we're about a dozen. About a dozen. That's, Dr. just mentioned the waivers. One of the things we see with that position is they're mostly retired law enforcement, and year after year, we've had to put in a waiver for retired employees that, again, are part of the state retirement system, and that 35, well, even prior to 35, was $30,000. So we had to get a waiver. I was putting out, and Mark predecessor was we put up that notice on the website. It's actually still up there, renewed every year. But if that waiver goes through, as Dr. Gerdes was discussing, that would be one less thing. It would be one less process. And I will say that process is not a short, easy process. That's a process that typically start early in the spring and sometimes don't get complete until January or July 1st, going back and forth with the state education department. So it's pretty complex, but my hope is that we was granted.
Yeah. Every school district in the land had a problem for this.
Absolutely, and the state is more inclined to provide the waiver for certain areas versus the others, with school security and safety being more accommodating, if you will. Other areas, I don't know, but again, with the waiver requirement potentially being out of the way, that might help us free.
And Dr. Birch, you bring up a very important point. Years ago, everybody advertised primarily through the New York Times. You put the education ads in the Lincoln Review, and you obviously cast a very broad net. Those ads over time grew more and more expensive, and really to the point where they became prohibitive. So the district got away from the New York Times and tried to do things with listservs, word of mouth, physical postings. What we found, though, was it really cut down on the amount of applications we got. And so, as you mentioned, OLAS is a program. It was created by BOCES upstate, but it's used in, I want to say, the vast majority of districts right now in New York State. And through OLAS, for a very reasonable amount of money, we are able to cast a very broad net, because anyone who's interested in working in New York, you don't just have to live in New York to access OLAS. If you're interested in coming here, you can access OLAS. So this program serves a critical need, and I want to thank Dr. Branscombe, because he, under his supervision, he did bring it to the district, and it has been a very effective tool. Just a few years ago, we did an ad for an elementary teacher, and maybe we got 100 applications. The last elementary teacher we had was over 1,000 applications. So, and of course, not every candidate, is, maybe they don't have the right certification or they don't have the right experience, but just the fact that number, makes it much more robust. We have a lot more to choose from, and certainly that has been the case, our experience for our instructional positions as well as our administrative positions. So I appreciate you mentioning that.
Can I just add one thing? And it's not just about volume and numbers, it's about that broad reach. We're stable, we're a nice community here, right?
Good place to work.
We're desirable.
So we're, reaching out not just across New York State, but not just even across the country, but internationally. I have gotten resumes from people that have been on other continents, so that are planning to move back to New York, because this is where they grew up, and they're accessing this information because of the availability of the web. And it's not only changing, again, our numbers, it's changing the diversity of our candidate pool, and I think that's important.
It's very good, so we can get some good language teachers.
And that is a challenge. I wish I could say we
I
get
know it is.
candidates per applicant or
I
per
know it is.
posting on that. We don't necessarily, but that's how tight it is.
That is a challenge. I do know, that's why when you said that, I know that it's not an easy position to fill.
That's great.
I do know that.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I did my research.
Right, moving on, we're gonna, being there's no further board discussion, we're gonna move on to public session. Maybe just to show how many people can speak, okay, like, good idea. Okay, we're not gonna take 30 minutes then, but, which is what we normally set aside, but I will read a brief statement I've read at most meetings. I wanna take a moment to read the statement of the Board of Education. Board of Education Administrator, Mr. Caffey, what the members of our community have to say. We hear from a variety of community members with different points of view. As a Board of Education, we recognize certain fundamental freedoms are essential to democratic nation. One of them is freedom of speech, but these freedoms are not without restriction. We will follow regulations specified by law and policy as we encourage our community members to offer public comment during Board of Education meetings. The Board of Education requests that anyone who stands up and speaks publicly that meetings are held in public view, public opportunity to watch the list of proceedings. In these meetings, the district updates the board on matters pertaining to school district meeting. In these meetings, the board also may require to take action on matters related to operations. On the board policy 1230, the board permits public comment under certain guidelines. With that in mind, the brief parameters of public comment. As I said, we normally set 30 minutes aside. I don't think we need 30 minutes tonight because I think we only have 1 or 2 speakers. The public reserves the right to limit public participation in a given case or the extent the maximum period of time is deemed necessary. Questions or comments by the public are limited to 3 minutes per person. Speakers are asked to identify themselves or anybody they represent, and the board may limit discussion of argument. So I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. So if anybody would like to speak, please step up to the podium.
Tracy Barada, and I just said a few things I didn't see, especially like where is the public funding in the whole budget proposal? Is that embedded in state aid? Is that separated out?
Would you mind asking all your questions so we can get the answer at the end?
Yeah.
We don't want to. I don't want you to burn 3 minutes.
So that was one of my questions. I don't understand why we're still using the PCR test for the FDA approval, which we moved at the end of December. I would encourage people not to test because then they're false positives and causing more quarantines than necessary. I had heard that there was BLM lessons being conducted this week, making students feel uncomfortable. It's a very divisive and controversial thing to go over in an English class in high school. I mean, it kind of leaves people as oppressor or, a victim. I don't think either one of them people would identify with. I come from a mixed family. I would never want my children to be indoctrinated in something that's divisive. And I don't see why that would have a place in Sayville School District. We send our kids to be educated, not indoctrinated, and I don't understand how that could be acceptable.
Okay, thank you. I think the part of the COVID, you had, just repeat the question about the COVID, I'm sorry.
COVID funding.
COVID funding?
There's COVID funding in that budget, I didn't see it.
Okay, that's what I didn't understand.
So is there any line item for the funding?
Yes, so COVID funding was, it's 2 things. So the actual state aid number that we got from New York State, that was embedded. It wasn't a lot of specific line item for us, but other grant funded amounts that we did get for COVID funding are not part of the general fund. They're not part of what's voted upon by the community. They are separate items.
How are they spent?
They're based on,
I think we answered the question. The money is coming from the state in 2 forms. It's embedded in our state aid and it's through grants. If you want to follow up with Dr. Burgess or Dr. Krishoni, we'd be more than happy to sit down with you and, maybe give you a more detailed.
I think the public, we're voting on the budget, it'd be nice to know what happened to that money.
Okay, well, but the public session is over now, right? So,
I think, I'm sorry, I believe Dr. Burgess answered that one question. If you have any additional questions, if you don't mind, can you just give the contact number to the district clerk and go back with the answers to the other 2 questions?
You don't have the.
Because I don't have the answers right now.
Okay.
But
Why
we will
are
get
we teaching BLM?
We don't have
I don't have an answer to that.
Oh.
I can't answer that, but I said.
From my understanding, could you define exactly what do you mean by that? Because there's different definitions and.
From what I understood, they were showing like a farming, different color. I mean, we don't want anti-police sentiment, we don't, I mean, I work in the city, I won't even go to Manhattan. I work in Jamaica and I feel like that's safer than going into Manhattan. Because of this defund the police movement and for bail reform, I don't want to see a sentiment created or people being taught that police are bad. I don't want anybody to be judged,
Now,
their
were you-
career to
was-
be judged by the worst element of.
Was your child in the class, or were you in the class?
No, it's one of my friend's children.
Okay, so,
But I want to know whether I should send my kids to private schools, so I can bring the funding down before they get to high school. If this is the way you're gonna have.
We are not teaching Black Lives Matter.
So, you know,
curriculum.
I would encourage your friend to contact the building principal. As with any concern, you know, I mean, there are times when concerns do come up over what's being taught. I'm not going to even hazard a guess as to what class your friend may have been referring to. What I would say is contact the building principal, follow up with him if it's secondary, and try to find out what the specifics are. I'm sure it could be addressed.
to Dr. Stummel's point, as an educator, I would encourage you to encourage your friend to reach out to the teacher first, so they can actually discuss the specifics of how the lesson was constructed, if it was based on state standards, if it was, how the discussion was framed, and then if that conversation is unsatisfactory, then you reach out to the building principal, and then you can.
I know that BLM and CRT is very controversial and it doesn't belong in the classroom.
Okay, but
We're talking about safety.
Yeah, but and frankly, I think we need to get to the facts, and the only way to get to the facts.
Okay, I think she can follow up.
Good, and to Mr. Cangelosi's point, we have it in policy as well as practice. Individuals should always start out with the teacher, and then if it doesn't, for whatever reason, work out to their satisfaction, they can follow up with the principal.
And again, if you could leave your contact information.
Sure.
And so we can get back to you with concrete answers to those questions. Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you for coming tonight. We're gonna move right on, if it's okay with everybody?
Yeah.
All right, I need a motion for 5-1 to 5-2.
Motion.
Oh, wait, I had something to say about that.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, these are the approval of the minutes, right?
Yes.
All right, so we'll do a motion, discussion.
Well, okay, I'm sorry.
I need a motion for 5-1 and 5-2.
Motion.
Second. Discussion. Kelly.
Yes. Sorry, I went out of order.
It's okay.
So the minutes for February 16th, I wanted to know if we could just include my question or suggestion that maybe strides look into making sure that everybody was respected regarding their choice. We had talked about that at the very end of the meeting,
Yes, we
and I think I didn't see it in here unless I overlooked it. I don't think it was.
We can make that note on the board discussion? Yes.
Yeah.
Our board discussion.
Yeah.
But just it was noted, Mrs. Macker, like
Right.
even if it doesn't show up on the
Yeah,
minutes.
okay, thank you. That was it.
All those in favor?
Yeah.
Motion carried. Without objection, could I call 6-1 through 8-2?
Motion.
Second. Discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. I need a motion to go into executive session to discuss contractual matters and, motion?
Motion.
Second? Sorry? Huh? Okay. All right, guys, thanks for coming. We're gonna recess for 2 minutes anyway, so.
But